Welcome. We're glad you're here and we're able to join us this evening. I'm Alyssa DeFilippo with Parents Helping Parents. I manage a program called Connections California, which is our online statewide resource and information hub for transition to adulthood and adult service. If you would like to hear a parent's perspective, practical lessons learned about transition to adulthood, you have come to the right place. I am so happy and thrilled to introduce Moira Allbritton, who is no stranger to our Connections California screen because she often comes and helps support the presentations. But this evening, she is going to be presenting on her lived experience. She is a program specialist in education and training with the Exceptional Family Resource Center, one of our sister organizations in San Diego, and has been involved in special education and advocacy for individuals with developmental disabilities for over 25 years. Along with 2 degrees from Northwestern University, she is a trained mediator, a mother of 5, count that, 5, and a spouse of a Navy retiree. And she says, at long last, a Navy retiree. So please join Moira as she retraces 3 different routes taken during transition to adulthood for 3 of her young adults. Thanks for coming. I'm going to stop my share. And there we go.
Hello. Thank you for the really nice introduction, Alyssa. Again, I'm really thrilled to be here. I feel like it's home here on Zoom, and we're going to get right into it. And I do want to start just by thank you for coming. I recognize that you have many things you could be doing on a September evening, and I'm glad that you're prioritizing not just your child, but also you and your role in that transition to adulthood. We are going to start with, hopefully, an agenda. I'm going to abbreviate this. Introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about support needs and how I think about them. We are going to do a transition overview. I think the part most people are here for is that priorities, like that retrospective, what mattered the most. There are going to be some very adorable pictures. There will be some practical tips and resources, and then, of course, contact information before Alyssa reminds you about polling, and then we get into the Q&A. So long ago, in a galaxy now far, far away, because the hair color is definitely changed, as is the energy level, I was that mom to 5 and wife to an active duty sailor who was gone so much that we have a shocking number of pictures that look like some variety of this one. Every child in this picture has multiple diagnoses and has received a variety of interventions. And today, though, tonight, we're going to just focus on 3. They share more than one diagnosis. So the 3 of them have very similar paper, I guess you'd say. But they help to really illustrate 3 very different kinds of pathways. And the thing that they have in common is those pathways, even though they're very different, have all led to what I would consider meaningful lives. And please know before we get further into this that I have their permission to talk about them, to share their pictures and likenesses, and to share my experience and anecdote about being their mom. And of course, it doesn't probably need to be said, but proud of all of them. So this feels a little Monty Python-esque, like a word about support needs. But when I present to families, I'm really sensitive to the idea that someone viewing this feels seen and understood, even on a Zoom webinar where we're not getting to interact directly. But I wanted to provide a way that I'm starting to think about support needs, and I hope it will resonate with you in a way that I think many of us have children who have been spoken of in terms like mild and moderate and severe. And if you're just listening and not watching, I was air quoting each of those words. I'm not sure those terms are super helpful or descriptive. And so as I go through the next several slides, please listen for words that might feel more familiar to you. And no, we are not going to go to Holland. So this first slide is a quick representation in my own paradigm of what non-disabled or not requiring daily support might kind of feel like. There's a lot going on. Folks are moving pretty efficiently. People are following all the rules. They are proceeding forward smartly, and they are, largely, again, with the air quotes, meeting expectations. So now we're going to meet some of my kids. I'm going to call him Jay in the right corner. He's in a teal shirt and a navy cover. That means hat, for those of you not immersed in the Navy culture. His is not a straight highway. His is, his support needs show us this representation of a curve in a road. And, that means, number one, that the pace is going to be a little variable, hopefully. And if you look, a fun aside, there's a pretty clever bell curve kind of hidden in there with Jay. I'm going to talk about 3 kids. Jay is a kiddo that would be kind of on the right-hand side of that bell curve. C is straight in the middle, and then T is kind of mirroring J on the far left. So you're going to get kind of that full spectrum of support needs. And so this is Jay. And I look at it as he could be, pretty challenging to keep on the road, especially when the road side has so much beauty to admire and so much to explore. And so we see over, even in that bottom left quadrant, we see where the looks like other people have gone off the roadway a little. And so with some support, though, Jay can stay on the road and get mostly where the others are getting to also. This is C. He's in the right corner. He's also wearing a navy cover because those appear to be the only pictures I took. And he's wearing a little red print top. And his support needs are represented by a more challenging topography. There's slopes, there's switchbacks. You can see in the foreground that there's some guardrails. And I think of progress for him as like this uphill journey, kind of getting up to the view. I don't know if that resonates with any of you, but starting at the bottom of the hill, I certainly thought, boy, I have a long way to travel with him. You can see the path though, and it's just going to take a little bit longer. We might have some doubling back, but the journey is kind of obvious. And then we have my handsome T in the right corner, and that would be my kid. The person next to him, of course, is my husband. And T's sitting there again, wearing the little navy cover. And my husband at the top, like right there, is looking super young and happy. And the reason I left him in the picture and didn't crop him out is because for T to be in the photo, he needed that support. So T's support needs are represented by this picture. And if you're not able to see it, it is, I'm pretty sure, AI assisted because it's highways going hither and yon, circling. There's, I'm confident that if I were trying to travel this actual roadway, that I would be lost, that I would not really know where I'm going, that my sense of direction would definitely fail me, and I might end up in circles. And again, some of these roads don't seem to get us exactly to a productive place. And with this photo, the thing that I was thinking is just, it's so hard to think of how a single person, let alone someone who might be unfamiliar to T, could do all the things that would let him access this kind of need, okay? So because this is Connections California and Parents Helping Parents webinar, I'm going to briefly review the way I also approach the idea of transition. So do a little review. There are 3 types of individual transition plan goals, or ITP goals. One has to be a post-secondary education goal. One has to be a post-secondary employment goal. And as appropriate, an independent living skills goal. The reason I show this is because you're going to see this in a different format later in the presentation. But for me, I was like, what are the questions we could ask to every student? And here we go. For that post-secondary employment, how do I contribute to my community? Down in that bottom right corner. In the bottom left corner, for post-secondary education, how do I keep learning? At the top, that independent living as appropriate. With whom do I live? And then I add a bonus question. What brings me joy and connection? In short, what is it that makes me as a student me? And how is that person going to continue developing in adulthood? Um, as an aside, this section could be populated by your child's and your input into the strengths and interests box on your child's IEP. And if that box happens to be boring or sparse or not updated, um, I would challenge you to show it some love at the next IEP meeting. So for adults, once you kind of make that transition, we will hopefully see the influence of some disability-related institutions. And of course, that will depend on the nature of your child's disability and need. But it could include, of course, for regional center clients, the individual program plan. It could include an individualized plan for employment from California Department of Rehabilitation. And also influencing it could be academic accommodations from, let's say, a disability support or disability service at a post-secondary institution. I've now abbreviated it to just learning, living, working, and fun, but not pictured that also might impact kind of this pyramid of adulthood greatness and meaningful living is public benefits, and then also, of course, natural supports. But my fourth slide is probably the most rawly accurate. It is not going to be perfect. You can put away your Sharpies, bring out your dry erase markers, or better yet, bring out your pencils, go old school. And I just remind you, again, kind of mirroring that pyramid, my children that aren't being featured tonight have called me to say I'm breaking up with someone, or I'm finding a new job, or I'm changing a major, or so far this hasn't happened, I need to move back in. So this is part of life. This is part of, but it's also a big part of transition. So why you're here, what mattered most. And this is, I'm trying to kind of stick to school and education, and what part of each of their IEPs I think was most impactful for their adulthood. And again, from the luxury of a rearview mirror. Interspersed in here are going to be 4 slides that identify factors that all 3 addressed, or all 3 that they had needs in those areas. And then there's going to be some slides that really relate just to one child. So let's get started. One factor that definitely impacted all 3, and again, that's J, C, and T, is a staff member that saw beyond their labels. And that, I don't mean that to sound trite at all, because each of those people that I was thinking about has just such a, special place in our family's kind of combined consciousness. Like, we still remember them by name, and I'm sure that you also viewing have those same kind of feelings about different teachers and paraeducators and related service professionals. It was the kind of intersection of the right person at that right developmental window with the right rapport, and you really saw something very special happening. But I would point out it wasn't every year, and it wasn't every single individual that touched our child. And I guess just kind of parent to parent, I certainly have days where I'm like, there's a lot of ordinary going on. And strangely, no one has come to my door and offered me the Mother of the Year or the Father of the Year or the Guardian of the Year award. And, there's a lot of effort in a lot of these days. And so in a weird way, I think, if I put in effort, I should see, such progress. And I would say the same thing about staff. There's, for our family, probably a cast of hundreds who undertook really difficult labor and maybe didn't have those incredible outcomes to show. And looking backward, it turned out okay not to have the perfect perfect match every time. So there's Jay again. He's looking ahead to his future, and his IEP, again, focused on these 3 areas: social communication, organization and planning, and written expression. So what do I think made the biggest impact? Well, first, I'm going to start with early identification. I was so clever that I volunteered him to be a reverse mainstreamer for his older brother's separate setting preschool class. And I had this idea that that was going to be parlayed into shopping at the grocery store with one child and not three. So within weeks, though, I was presented with an assessment plan. And here we are. We begin the special education journey. Here we have General Douglas MacArthur giving a speech. So obviously I've kind of accelerated through some of the early years because what I identified as something that was super impactful for Jay was the opportunity to really recognize, celebrate, integrate his specific areas of interest into showing what he knew, or as the hook to bring him into maybe less preferred activities. So here we have a child that loved history, leveraging that motivation for good, hopefully, and not evil. I'm including this little photo just for a fun story. It's kind of a terrible joke. A piano, a clarinet, a violin, and a French horn walked in to my house in successive years. This child every year wanted to play a new instrument, which basically assured me that I would go from very, very novice to just starting to sound like the instrument it was intended to be. And then it would go away and we'd get another year of practice that wasn't so beautiful, right? Um, and so after a year of French horn, he was told, this is the final instrument you will be playing forever. So as a small sideline, he also, this is around the time that he got some support over the summer that was super important. And it's kind of an odd thing. They agreed, the school, that he needed to learn how to ride mass transit. So over the summer, they practiced him taking the bus, changing the bus, getting to school. And this turned out to not just be a safety win, but it provided him with the independence to access his school and be able to participate in extracurriculars. You already heard there was a military person not there all the time. There was a lot of kids with needs. So this allowed him to access this. And cross country, no, it wasn't in his IEP, but it proved to be of really incredible impact to him. And so I am not including it because he happens to be leading the race at that moment, but rather because this is where he found his people. And so moving into this idea of executive function, believe me, I'm coming back to Mr. Runner. He learned through the process of cross country what he could do to manage his somewhat challenging executive function. He learned that running helped him to kind of take some of that energy out. Not too distracted, like what's the happy medium? Not too distracted, not too exhausted. How to filter out some of the nonsense stimuli and how to attend to those important and sometimes not very preferred bits. Jay found not only those people, but he found that space that running gave him to think, to regulate, to process some social interactions, to plan what he would need to do after cool down and hopefully a shower, right? For my mountain climber son, so C, the most important thing he learned was strategies, from the high tech of learning how to maintain like an online calendar that is a huge boon for him now as an adult, to things like low tech highlighter, like, hey, it's a highlighter. We don't necessarily highlight every single word when we're trying to highlight. So helping him to manage demands, helping him to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, how to identify what's a big deal, what's a little deal, creating some routines to kind of take some of that cognitive load and shift it into something that was just automatic, and giving him a little more room to do actual thinking and actual, maybe math, for example. So for T, my complicated highway son, the most important thing he learned, I would say, and is still learning, is the part of the executive function that sounds like emotional regulation. It is really hard. And I mean, even today, literally today. And when he is dysregulated, there isn't learning, there isn't relating, there isn't planning, there is just reacting. And so that is just, it's hard to picture a child that wouldn't benefit from this area at least being contemplated. So we're going to return over to C. And his major areas of need were communication and academics, social, emotional, and vocational experience. And he started receiving services very young. So this is him at age 2. The pictures are much better for the younger ones because of digital technology. And this is shortly after he had brain surgery. So he is in this picture signing dirty, and he was correct. And again, early identification was a contributing factor to the things that he's been able to master. The provision of an augmentative alternative communication, or AAC device, allowed us to figure out that he knew so much more than we thought. And it allowed him to start forming those relationships outside of the circle of just his family and paid professionals. This is him starting high school. And this is him ending high school. This is a picture taken on the last day of workability. He's at Ace Hardware. And this is the part where the parent reflects, wow, I almost blew it. I almost refused to let him participate in vocational work experience because that semester, he was a COVID kid, obviously, and he needed to pass every single class, and it was kind of a squeaker for some of them, in order to graduate. And I, at the time, was like, diploma? Super important. Work experience, oh, blah. Nope. Who would have guessed that he would gain so much from stocking items, sweeping floors, clearing recycling? You don't have to guess, because all the way back in 2008, researchers like Chandra and Hogan told us participation in cooperative education programs would increase financial compensation, likelihood of full-time work, and the receipt of fringe benefits. And here I am. This is my job, and I still almost said no. So you'll see that this was a pretty big deal, that he did participate, and you'll see what he gained. Self-advocacy. So all three obviously participated in goals work to address self-advocacy, because it's a yellow slide. For J, navigating peer pressure, asking the question, are you being true to your goals, to your values? Like having to, like, if you don't agree with someone, how do you do that? How do you do it respectfully? How to ask for the accommodations you need. That's a pretty huge need if you're going to, go to post-secondary education. For C, his self-advocacy goals tended to be, especially later in his career, looking at like how to maybe talk about disability, how to recognize his disability, how to reflect on his disability, and then how would he disclose that disability. Disclosure, though, I will promise you, was pretty obvious, but still, like working through what does this mean? And learning who to ask for what sort of assistance, that we don't just ask anyone for anything, that we have to kind of target our questions to be more effective. For T, self-advocacy went back all the way to making choices, being able to express preferences appropriately, and communicate needs. Okay. So I'm going to continue with T, and he's up in the top corner, looking very suave. And I'm thinking about his IEP. So we're going all the way back to 19 diggity diggity, and every area was an area of need on his first 110-page IEP back when they were still written longhand, and they were not finished in an hour, I will say. So T's early photo is a little bit older, elementary school kiddo. This is him being in the community. And so I would really highlight that, interacting with people and materials and activities that are actually in the places that you would find those activities and people and materials, those real world situations are and remain incredibly important and motivating to him. And it was a very effective part of his later adult transition program. Again, I was not initially programmed to go, yay, vocational. It's super important. And thank you for the heart. I love the little heart floating up. Thanks. Um, this one is just to remind us that we are all, I hope, in a marathon. This is not the usual second grader First Communion picture. My teen is towering over the priest and Sister H in this photo. And I included it mostly because it just reminded me that like there isn't a timetable for getting to your goal. And then this is evidence of what a direct, sequential, structured, multi-sensory literacy program delivered with fidelity, all the buzzwords, by trained individuals has produced. This is a young man who consistently is well outperforming his test scores. He is able to access the world via written communication in a way that I don't think anybody would have predicted when he was, certainly in early elementary school. And then our fourth commonality is failure and risk. These kids wouldn't be the men that they are without failures. And I would say the same about me. Sometimes you fail to get to the next thing. And for one of the children, too immature for math class, took it later, did fine. One child, too little progress. That's the thing that gave him access to that multisensory literacy instruction. Too much behavior, identifying through trial and plenty of errors, an appropriate and durable placement. So really that idea of like, sometimes we have to fail to get to the thing that's going to be of tremendous benefit. So before we get to, I guess, the question, what did those boys become when they grew up part, this parenting is serious business. In case this half hour and kind of magical coverage of what would be if it was laid end to end is 88 years of living. It's not unicorns and puppies and kitties and rainbows, right? And so I'm putting this here just to remind you when you look at social media or when you look at, my slide deck, that by all appearances, these are two very happy young men in the backseat of their parents' car. On the left, this apparently was the take your kid to work day because I couldn't, with my job, shake free midday to shuttle him from a program to another service. So he got to come to work, which probably isn't the most ideal, most optimal option. On the right, I purposefully have left that contrast of a photo I took. This is 3 days after Christmas. My son looks perfectly thrilled to be there. I, on the other hand, was still pretty, was still processing his 5150 hold. He was quickly released, but, my beloved eldest, we don't always have photos that accurately show what's going on. So, but we're going to have some happy pictures. And this is looking at what does it look like to be an adult? So we're going to start with Jay. I'm going to focus on that post-secondary education piece. He did get through college and he did get through his grad degree, although he did have a pretty significant hiccup in doing so. And in fact, had a conversation with faculty where they suggested maybe that he would benefit from like a meeting or two with a speech therapist, at which point he said, oh, well, they're like, do you know what they do? And he's like, oh yeah, I had them all the way through, my high school. So knowing that there are support needs and that sometimes, what did I want to say about little Jay? taking a pause for a second. I guess I just want to say, like, he's living a life that's meaningful. It's challenging. There's loans, there's work. He has parents that call him and ask questions. And his job is in the healthcare field, and he is serving patients who have a lot in common with his brothers. And, of course, I'm proud and happy and I think this is, a close approximation to what, the standard definition of, like, oh, this is meaningful life. But here's the thing. C, and my C is clearly Charlie. He is also living a life that is meaningful. And I have focused on the um, part-time paid work and art program just to kind of make that through line. That high school semester of 2 hours a week was parlayed into a position when he left high school. And yes, it was only 4 hours a week paid. But it was the thing that made it possible for me to imagine him as a contributing member of a work team of which I am not in the building. He would tell you that there's too many seizures. And I would add that there are too many completely rational questions about marriage because adorable girlfriend. And this is a meaningful life. Very meaningful. And T, he is living a life that is meaningful. And I've highlighted that independent living triangle because that is not the answer that most people conjure up in their head when they think about, oh, meaningful life. Yes, he lives in an adult residential facility, and he is living a life that is meaningful, albeit intermittently and explosively bleeping difficult. Those asterisks indicate interruptions in access. So yes, he volunteers, but he has had interruptions in being able to volunteer. Yes, he had Zumba class. We don't have a way to do that right now. Program was intermittent. However, he persists. And when you look closely and look beyond, kind of those answers in those triangles, you see he was recognized for being a visitor of the month at a place I did not know he was visiting. He was recognized for his volunteer work at Jewish Family Services locally, and he's contributing to cleanup at a church he does not even attend. He's there voting. He's there at an art exhibition. He loves to go to good music, Billy Joel. And he is an integral part of a chaotic, loud, ridiculous at times family that adores him. And so this is a meaningful life to me. So some quick parent-to-parent tips if you happen to be embarking on transition for your loved one. First, what do I think that we did right? This is a trick question. We tried our best, and I would say we are continuing to improve on our ability to manage change and frustration and occasional upset and surprise. And so I think anything you can do in that area for yourselves, I think is great. We were amazing at cognitive flexibility as young people, and we are becoming less so with age. And by cognitive flexibility, I mean turning on a dime, identifying other options, moving forward. And now we get a little stuck. So I need to start working on that again. So this has been helpful for me. And then in the middle, showing up, getting up, looking up. We are all doing that, right? You're here, you're showing up. Most of us are getting back up when we get a curveball. And looking up, I was thinking about that idea of looking up to mentors, how important they are, even with white hair. Looking up information that things still change on me and Alyssa. And then that, like looking up, like dreaming of bigger, better for all the young people and all the folks that, we serve or those people that we really care about. So here's your list of top 10 recommendations from somebody who's been there. Go. First, when you are entering the adult service world, the scheduling can be a little tricky. And so if you wait for everything to be perfect, you might miss an opportunity. So I encourage you to don't get stuck on those kind of details, try things out. Never would I ever have my child says the woman who had to place a minor child in a residential facility. So be ready to open your mind to something you might have thought was not in the cards. I am always encouraging folks to broaden your circle of support. Be open to making a new mom or dad friend. Those new experiences, we need them too. Kindness, empathy, enough said. Paperwork. If you can see my background, I am a pile queen. Parent to parent tip, put that summary of performance on that last IEP, put that in a safe place. Level up that paperwork organization as your child heads into adulthood. Work experience, work experience, work experience. And this is something I actually heard a version of at a PHP training. That idea that our children are too good or too fragile or too unpredictable to benefit from work experience. Not true. Mindfulness. Yes, transition is challenging for us as parents, and we have to also remember things are actually happening to our young adults. So we have to be there for them too. Keep learning. Everything seems to be changing fast, and it can be, a challenge to stay on top of it. And I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing tonight. Come to these wonderful opportunities in Connections, California. If it isn't working, we are looking elsewhere, creating something, helping to make something better. And if you are like, oh, I can't do that, you can bring disability awareness or policy or tackle ableism where you see it in your sphere of influence. That would be great. That would work too. And then lastly, whenever possible, the idea is to be the second one to answer as your child becomes an adult. I know that's been a challenge for me, that I have to be very intentional as I go into meetings, don't talk first. There's lots of how to parent books, and there's not very many commercially successful how to downshift your parenting. So those are my top 10. And I'm going to kind of conclude my talk right at 40 minutes. This looks like a pile of gravel, right? And this gravel can turn into a pathway or a road. And as parents, our roles are to support our young people and their making of progress. They're taking their trip into adulthood. And that hard hat on that very adorable child reminds me that transition is a construction zone. And we as parents do have a big part in building what comes next. Okay. So some resources for folks. This is an oldie but goodie, and I am putting it up there in Shasta 21st Century Career Connections. The reason I love this one so much is that it reminds us that being a teen is a lot of work, as is being an adult. And just because it says all teens, guess what? Some of our kids are going to grow into adult men, and they're going to still be working on this for a while. And so there are potential IPP, individual program plan goals. There are potential IPE, individualized plan for employment goals, or even ITP, individual transition plan, as part of your IEP goals hidden in here. So I encourage you to kind of look at this with an eye to, hey, what would be kind of our next step? This is actually a kind of bringing back around a presentation that I attended through Connections California when Michelle Garcia Winter came, and she talked about launching youngsters. She didn't say launching, but that was the idea. How do you prepare your child? What do we need to teach? What do we take on as parents? The school's doing this. Regional Center maybe is doing this. What is our role? And she really did such a beautiful job, and it is a free article. And if you didn't see her speak, go read the article. And she has tons of webinars and free articles on her website, and I just can't rave enough about it. I'm adding these two in just in case anybody online tonight would want to kind of fill this in with thinking and reflecting about their own child or students that they work with. And I am seriously happy to hear from anyone that happens to be participating this evening. Feel free to reach out, and happy to, engage with you. And now we are at comments or questions, which actually means that it's about time to launch a poll. and I'll let Alyssa talk.
Yes, indeed. Not so much launch a poll. I actually do a
Oh, I'm
Google one.
sorry.
That's
Edit that
okay. That's
out.
all right. But it is in the chat. Folks are just moving the links up because they're saying thank you for this truly inspirational talk. I mean, that's how I feel. I laughed. I
You
couldn't get
laughed,
to
you
my.
cried, you
I did. I laughed. I teared up a couple of times. It's amazing to me, Moira. You have five. You have five, and you were just able to go through your journey with three of them with such love and such empathy and such detail with what each one needed and addressing each one of those needs. It's amazing. And that's what somebody else said in the chat. Uh,
Oh,
I
thank you.
forget. Oh, I love how you looked at the needs of your children instead of focusing on the disability label. So that's what we all need to be doing for
It
sure.
didn't happen overnight.
No,
88 years
right.
later, no.
Right. We may not be we may be cognitively rigid now, but we've learned a lot along the way.
We
We need to
have,
go
and
back and
we
become less rigid. But the only question I see so far is, are we willing to share the slides? And yes, I'm putting in the chat that the slides will come to you tomorrow. And the video of this will be up in our PHP video library within 2 to 3 weeks. You have to give us a little bit of time. It's not so much our forte, the IT work, but we try, we do our best. So does anybody else have anything else they'd like to say or comment? And I'm kind of even open to if people want to raise their hands and you want to talk, and then we'll edit out voices and names or anything. But
I
if you want to have more of a conversation, I kind of feel like if we're ever going to do something like that, this is the night. So let me just check.
and it'll
Um,
get edited out. I think the
yes, it
question, so
absolutely
you
will.
won't be preserved. I saw a Q and or question somewhere. I did just drop my email in. I don't
Could
know
you
if it's
present your
going.
contact
I
information again?
probably didn't
Yes.
do everyone. Let me try that again. So apologies for that. And it will be in the slides. I can type while I
While you're
talk.
talking,
I am typing and
multitasking.
talking.
Um,
There.
here's some questions are popping up now. So uh where do you suggest starting to get outside help figuring out where to get evaluations for your
Oh
kiddo?
boy.
Looks
Um,
like they have a 25-year-old.
ooh. I would probably still start with either your family resource center or your family empowerment center, keep going, give me the other acronyms. Going to folks in your neighborhood or in your area who are parent organizations. You will find repository of like local knowledge. And the difficulty is 25-year-old, you're not in the school district anymore, so it's a little more challenging to get those evaluations. But I think if it's a psychological evaluation, sometimes through your health insurance, but I would leave that to the more local folks to help you navigate. Do you have something to add on that, Alyssa?
Vocational, there's always DOR, the
Yeah,
Department of Rehab, right? And
yeah.
like anything else, there are good teachers, there are bad teachers. There are there are good, DOR people, there are bad DOR people. There are good and bad of everything. But I think the most important thing that I've noted with folks with DOR is the willingness of the individual to actually want to get a job, to want to learn about what they want to learn to do. So, those kind of vocational assessments, a lot of DOR folk do them, and folks never do anything with that. But it's just a matter of the motivation of the person. And what's helpful in uncovering what motivates them is doing these vocational assessments early and often. And I think that Moira even commented on that, how the work experience, the business experience, those high school internships, the high school job. I don't was it for C? Was it for C or
Yeah,
T? Or,
see,
yes, for
see.
C. Made so much more of a difference for him than the education. And there are studies that are done on that. I mean, I quote them in
Oh,
presentations that I give. So yes, it's the experience, and we as parents have to get out of our own heads about, oh, education, educational assessment, psychoeducation evaluation, and really start thinking that the time outside of school is so much longer than the time in school. If you can just help your loved one to understand what motivates them, what moves them, what's their passion, what do they want to do, and you've seen from these three examples tonight that it could be wildly different, but being able to recognize it and run with it and support it and scaffold it, and then, and Moira said this too, move from being the driver to being the passenger, because you're no longer, and honestly, what I've been thinking about lately, we're not going to be here forever. So it's really going to be
That
important
uplifting part. Yep.
yes, right. But hey, it's the truth, and I've come to terms with it. But so you want to know that they're going to be able to stand as much as they can on their own with the support that they can get.
So there is a question about what if your young adult doesn't want to work? And don't panic, I'll go back up and catch some other questions. But if your young adult doesn't want to work, how do you deal with that and other people's opinions too? So in some ways, I think other people's opinions are sometimes really challenging. And so, you know, I'm going to look at Alyssa and go, what do you do when other people tell you their opinions and they weren't invited to tell you their opinions? And I probably shouldn't weigh in on that one. If my young adult doesn't want to work, I think we are all walking a very interesting road right now. We have, I think we're all very invested philosophically, at least the people on this call, in the idea of self-determination. I think there's also, though, hard, cold reality. And I sometimes think like, if they don't want to work, what is it that we can identify that is that barrier? Is it that they don't understand the benefit? And sometimes, like paid employment is a very big motivator for a lot of our people, including C. He was all about show me that workability paycheck. He was very excited by. And I think the other thing is just figuring out the competency. Like, I think the idea of doing labor for labor's sake is different than being part of a team, being around materials, topics, that are enjoyable or, reinforcing to the individual. And so if that, I'm happy to talk to you offline more about your child, or Alyssa would, but to me, that is a deeper question than just, I want to work or not. You really have to kind of tease it out. Go ahead, Alyssa. I'm sure you have a thought.
Yeah, I would just say that, one of my mentors is Trudy Grable, and in the PHP community, I think a lot of people know who she is. And she'll talk about her daughter not wanting to work, doesn't want a job, doesn't want to work. And, because Trudy is a person-centered planner, and she has, she looks at everything through that person-centered lens, which I think is wonderful and I want to emulate. But her daughter volunteers. Her daughter goes to a program. Her daughter has a boyfriend. Her daughter has interests and passions and things that she wants to do. So, with that said, it's okay if you don't want to work. But I think the other side of the coin is that the way we look at employment for our loved ones, and this goes back to having those vocational assessments early and often, and really figure out what it is that they want to do, what kind of floats their boat, what their passion is that we have these little, we want to fit them into these holes, work in a supermarket, work in a Home Depot, work in these places where they'll stock shelves, they'll do things, whatever. And some people like that, and that's fine. But other people don't want to be a beggar at Safeway. And so after 2 or 3 months of doing it, they start getting some aberrant behaviors. They don't like being there. They don't want to do what they do, and they end up getting fired. And then people say, oh, he can't work, she can't work. Well, is that the truth, or is that just they weren't in the environment that they wanted to be in? So kind of two sides of a coin there. And going back to Trudy, I think her daughter is 40 and clearly has decided she doesn't want to work. So be it. So there's times when you just have to accept that too.
I want to give you this quick, easy one, flash round. What age do you best recommend starting this adult transition for your loved one? Melissa, you want to take it?
2.
I tried to hit on that like really but it's so hard to say, oh yeah, your child is, a
Yeah,
baby and
well,
you're
it
already,
is very hard. But when I say that, I say every IEP from 3 years old and on should have a self-advocacy goal because
thank
what
you.
we're trying to do is grow these robust self-advocates who know what they want and how to make decisions and how to make choices. So when I say 2, I'm being a little flip, but there are districts throughout California that are working on having those transition skills and transition to adulthood skills, both in employment and social and educational, embedded into their IEPs in elementary school. So yeah, the earlier, it's never too early or too late. So if you're sitting out there and you have a 16 or 17-year-old and their ITP is cookie cutter and they're still learning how to balance a checkbook, okay, I mean, I've really seen that. Um, don't stress. We're not meaning to stress, but
No.
it's just helpful to start early.
Um, you said something and now I've lost it, but that's okay. We'll just jump to the next
Yeah,
question.
I'm
And if
trying
I
to go
think of
back
it,
and forth because folks are putting stuff in the chat too.
what do you say to parents who are thinking about placing their student into a group setting but feeling guilty about it? And I'm not sure if that is referencing group employment or group residential. So if I think it's Petra, if you want to just give me a little more to work with, I'm happy to circle back. Getting an outside
Residential.
education, residential. Oh, um, I would love for you to reach out to me because we are releasing a 5-part video series, and it is myself and another one of our staff members, and it's really related to everywhere, not just San Diego. We're happy to share it.
Oh,
Um,
we'd love that.
kind of, kind of a parent to parent on that residential placement issue, things to think about, things that. Oh, look at Alyssa light up.
When, yeah, my eyes can't get any wider. When are
Um,
you doing this?
we have the videos. They are available. They're subtitled in 5 threshold languages. They are in Spanish and English. Um,
Lovely.
and it's really more about the parent to parent piece of like navigating some of those feelings, kind of prepping you for what's the same, what's different. So
Wow.
yeah, and I would say it is probably the hardest thing that I've had to do, and I've had to do some hard things, but it is one of those to make sure you have some support from somebody either that's been through it or who has seen your family in all of its glory. Most people don't consider this unless they've had um,
Mm.
some big issues to grapple with. So please, feel free to reach out or reach out to Alyssa, and she can. I'll make sure that we communicate about that.
Yeah, and let us know the link when that is that just going to be on the website
I
or
think I haven't been privy. I just know it's ready whenever we can get it up there, people can start accessing it.
all right. I'm going to look for that. That sounds like a great companion piece to so much of what we do.
Thank you, David, for
And we
that
just all
comment.
share. We just share in
We
the in
just
the
share
in the
everything.
FEC and PTI world. We don't care about who did what.
So I love the student services question Diana is putting in. She said that they had taken a break during the summer. School started, and then the Department of Rehab person is not necessarily responding. The person is following up. What do they do? I'm going to say that being involved in special education is giving you a lot of advocacy skills. And one of them I certainly learned both from special education and the United States Navy is the chain of command. Everybody works for someone. Um, one more good email, chances are they might have been reassigned to a different position or who knows. Um, but I would say it's time to call and say, hey, like call that local DOR and say, I'm not hearing back. Can you please put me in contact with someone who can assist my child? And then kind of take it from there. That would be my quick answer, Alyssa.
Yeah, I don't. I think that's it. We practiced how to go from the teacher to the resource specialist to the principal to the director of special ed. So use those same kind of advocacy advocacy tactics with Dior. But a couple of the questions just talk about the IEP was more than 5 years ago. What could we possibly do now? Transition planning was neglected. He's at home, no services, not leaving the house. Where do I begin? So those two are kind of combined. Any thoughts on
Um,
that?
you're not alone would be my very, very first thing is you are not alone. And in most cases, there is a pathway back to getting some support. It really just depends on the very specifics of your individual. And again, I would say, whether it's PHP, whether you're somewhere else, we can certainly try to connect you to a person who could help you in your local area. I want to really emphasize that um, you cannot overestimate the value of those relationships locally to helping somebody find that resource. What would I do? What would you do? I would say DOR is probably the easiest first place to go, but
Well, yeah, and regional centers, so 21 regional centers, 21 different ways of doing things, right? But most of them have employment specialists.
Mhm.
And of course, you have to exhaust the DOR, supported employment uh, uh, program, before you can go to the regional center, and the regional center would supply any money for under the employment specialist. On October 1st, the uh, the chief of the employment division of DDS. His name is Michael Luna. He's going to be here presenting Ready, Set, Go, Plan for Employment, I think was the title we chose.
Mhm.
But if you come to that, that might be helpful in understanding the different programs that the regional center has. There's a coordinated career pathways, which is kind of new. The eligibility is a little restrictive, but I understand that might be opening up a little bit more as it rolls out. Now things take time, so it might not be for another 5 years, but that's my understanding. Um, the paid internship program. You don't have to be, in high school. In fact, I don't think you can be in high school to have a paid internship. I'm really not sure about that. Do you know that, Moira? I'm not sure.
Can you be in high school?
High school and have a paid intern. I think you have to be over 18. But
I think
anyway,
you have to also, because regional centers very much, if you're still eligible, at least ours,
yeah,
if you're still eligible for local education agency services, they really expect you to exhaust those generic
yeah, that's true.
services.
That's true. That's true. So whatever, my daughter's 27. She has a paid internship. So, there are ways of doing things once you're older. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop.
There is a question, Elsterney, I think it was. What is the best way to get an outside educational assessment to bring to IEP and ITP discussions? One recommendation that I would make, just parent to parent, I'm not giving legal advice or any other advice for that matter, is really to focus on having an individual connecting it back to the educational setting. It is often very difficult to take a clinical evaluation, bring it to an IEP meeting, and have the team really be able to act on it. If the person who is doing that assessment is willing to come and do some sort of observation at school, I think it has a lot more credibility. That would just be my 2 cents as a non-attorney, non-person. And Alyssa
Okay.
is nodding for those of you listening.
Yeah, and I'm also trying to answer questions as we long, but I also see by
Oh,
the clock on the screen, it's 7:33,
oh
and
heavens.
both of us could probably go on talking, for hours, but we're not going to do that. We're going to respect everybody's time, and we are going to. Do you have any final words, though, Moira, that you'd want to end on?
You know what? I want to just thank all of you for being here tonight. It's always wondering if is anybody even going to show up and be interested in this topic. And I again thank you for the hearts. That it's been a hard week, and I appreciate them. So thank you, and thank you, Alyssa, for the opportunity to come and talk about my favorite topic.
Sure, we should have, like, the Q&A session with Moira and
No,
Alyssa.
we
Maybe
should just
we'll
have
talk
parent
about
hour.
that for next semester. Yeah, just sit around and chat with everybody for now. Don't record it, just
Yeah,
everybody talk.
exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, Moira, as always, for your wisdom, for making us laugh, make us cry. Beatrice, thank you. We tried to talk slowly. I'm not sure if we actually
Thank you
succeeded.
to our interpreter too,
Yes,
Beatrice.
Beatrice is wonderful. Yeah. And And thank you all for coming and spending some time with us. And you know, take a look at the calendar. It'll be in the links tomorrow. I've caught a bunch of the links from the chat that will also be in what we send out tomorrow. And just, you know, keep on keeping on, I guess, right?
We have no
Okay,
other choices, right?
there we go.
Keep
No other
getting up.
choice. All
Show up.
right. Thanks everybody for coming.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you.